The 97th plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. I declare open the high-level meeting of the General Assembly on HIV/AIDS. This meeting is held in accordance with Assembly Resolution 70/228 of the 23rd of December 2015 and Decision 68/555 of the 30th of June 2014 and takes place under Agenda Item 11, entitled Implementation of the Declaration of Commitment on HIV/AIDS and the Political Declarations on HIV/AIDS. I warmly welcome you all to this high-level meeting, which will undertake a comprehensive review of the progress achieved in realizing the Declaration of Commitment on HIV/AIDS and the Political Declaration on HIV/AIDS of 2006 and 2011, including successes, best practices, lessons learned, obstacles and gaps, challenges and opportunities, including with regard to the partnership and cooperation, the recommendations to guide and monitor the HIV/AIDS response beyond 2015, including concrete strategies for action to end the AIDS epidemic by 2030, as well as to promote the continued commitment and engagement of leaders to accelerate a comprehensive, universal and integrated response to HIV/AIDS. The General Assembly has before it a draft political declaration of the high-level meeting issued as document A/70/L52 that has been distributed in the hall disc to disc. Before proceeding further, I would like to inform members that action on the draft political declaration will be taken following the opening statements. Heads of State and Government, Mr. Secretary General, Honourable Ministers, Under Secretary General Michel Sidibé, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, allow me to extend a special welcome to Mrs. Lois Maturo, representative of people living with HIV, and Mr. Ndaba Mandela, AIDS activist and grandson of the late Nelson Mandela. I also wish sincerely to thank the United Nations Programme on HIV/AIDS for their enormous support with the preparations for this meeting. Excellencies, Nelson Mandela once described HIV/AIDS as the greatest danger we have faced for very many centuries, as being worse than war. How right he was. It is hard to believe and hard to accept that some 34 million people have died from AIDS-related diseases and that 14 million children have been orphaned as a result. And it is even harder to believe that we should not accept that in this world of incredible possibility, approximately 6,000 new HIV infections occur daily, and that some 36.9 million people are living with HIV. Today is the moment, therefore, that collectively we signal our intentions to strike out for victory, to fast-track efforts over the next 5 years and to end the AIDS epidemic by 2030. It is an epidemic that undermines development, significantly impacts on economic growth, and can be a major concern in conflict and post-conflict situations. But most of all, it's an epidemic that haunts ordinary people, particularly in developing countries, those who are living with, at risk of, and affected by HIV, as well as their families. It affects women and girls more than any other group, such as in sub-Saharan Africa, where women and girls are more than twice as likely to become HIV positive than boys of the same age. It can have tragic impacts for young people who account for more than a third of the new HIV infections among adults and who often have limited access to information services and programs that they need to protect themselves from HIV. And it greatly impacts on certain key populations that are globally at higher risk of HIV, such as those who inject drugs, sex workers, men who have sex with men, transgender people, and prisoners. Over the coming days, let us be both mindful and listen to these people. Excellencies, in recent years, thanks to the political commitment of world leaders and the incredible solidarity, innovation, and bravery of others, we have been making strong progress towards the goals and targets set out in 2011. But if we want to reach our 2030 goals and targets and deliver on the political declaration that you will consider shortly, all stakeholders must now step up to the plate. We have to deliver greater global solidarity, bring more resources, and spend them more efficiently. We have to bring even greater collaboration and partnership, building on the many excellent initiatives created these past 2 decades aimed at prevention, treatment, care, and support. We have to pay much greater attention to the principles of equality and inclusion, uphold all human rights, and speak out against discrimination and stigma. We have to empower women and girls, ensure they gain access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, and that they can live their lives free from violence. We have to ensure that key populations are fully included in AIDS responses and services, and that services are made available for them. And ultimately, we have to be accountable for the commitments we make on big stages like this one, to leave no one behind and to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, including by securing healthy lives and well-being for all. Excellencies, ending the AIDS epidemic would be one of the greatest achievements of our lifetimes. It can be done, and it must be done. I thank you. And now I give the floor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon.
Your Excellency, Mr. Movens Likhatov, President of the General Assembly, Honorable Ministers, distinguished cordial ambassadors, UNAID Executive Director Michel Sidibe, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today to open this important high-level meeting on HIV/AIDS. 10 years ago, when I took over as a Secretary General, AIDS was still devastating families, communities, and nations. In many low-income countries, treatment was scarce. In 2007, only 3 million people, 1/3 of those in need, had access to life-saving antiretroviral drugs. We have made enormous progress. Since 2000, the global total of people receiving antiretroviral treatment doubled every 3 to 4 years, thanks to cheaper drugs, increased competition, and new funding. Today, more than 17 million people are being treated, saving billions of lives and billions of dollars. The world achieved the Millennium Development Goal 6. We have halted and begun to reverse the spread of HIV/AIDS. New HIV infections have declined by 35% since 2000. AIDS-related deaths have gone down by 43% since 2003. I am particularly happy that new HIV infections among children are down by 56% in the past 15 years. 4 countries have eliminated them completely: Cuba, Thailand, Armenia, and Belarus. I hope we will reach 0 new infections among children soon. None of this could have happened without the leadership of people living with HIV and civil society partners on the ground around the world. They believed that more equitable treatment and access was possible, and they made sure that we responded. They broke the silence and shone a light on discrimination, intolerance, and stigma. They brought passion to their fight, and that passion will make the end of AIDS a reality. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, progress and investment in the AIDS response has changed the face of global health. They have strengthened health systems, social protection, and community resilience. These approaches and mechanisms are a model to meet the many challenges that result in repeated disease outbreaks and new epidemics. But AIDS is far from over. Over the next 5 years, we have a window of opportunity to radically change the trajectory of the epidemic and put an end to AIDS forever. Despite remarkable progress, if we do not act, there is a danger the epidemic will rebound in low and middle-income countries. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development affirms the global commitment to ending the epidemic within 15 years. Action now could avert an estimated 17.6 million new infections and 11 million premature deaths between 2016 and 2030. But we must make a radical change within the next 5 years if we are to achieve that goal. That requires commitment at every level, from the global health infrastructure to all member states, civil society organizations, and non-governmental organizations, to the United Nations Security Council that has dealt with AIDS as a humanitarian issue and a threat to human and national security. I call on the international community to reinforce and expand the unique, multi-sector, multi-actor approach of UNAIDS as an integral element of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. This means making sure that we meet the annual target of $26 billion in funding, including $13 billion for the next 3 years through the Global Fund's 5th replenishment. It means continued advocacy to the most vulnerable groups and approaches that promote gender equality and empower women. It means leaving no one behind and removing punitive laws, policies, and practices that violate people's dignity and human rights. It means that everyone affected must have access to comprehensive HIV services without discrimination. Young people, migrants, women and girls, sex workers, men who have sex with men, people who inject drugs, transgender people, and prisoners. And it means that meeting must issue a strong political declaration to galvanize the commitment that will be needed to meet this challenge. The future of people with HIV/AIDS, many of whom are children and among the most vulnerable, must be central to every decision. I thank the delegates who have been working to reach consensus on this declaration. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this may be my last address to the United Nations General Assembly on the subject of HIV/AIDS. This cause has moved and inspired me. Together, the most marginalized, the people left behind, the extraordinary health and social workers on the ground, UNAID, and you, the member states, have shown great commitment and resolve to end this epidemic once and for all and leave an AIDS-free world for future generations. The AIDS response is a source of innovation and inspiration, demonstrating what is possible when science, community activism, political leadership, and passion and compassion come together. I commend everyone involved in this remarkable effort, and I wish you success in your deliberations and in ending the worldwide scourge of HIV/AIDS. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General for his statement, and it's a great pleasure, in accordance with General Assembly Resolution 70/228 of the 23rd of December 2015, now to invite to the floor Michel Sidibé, Executive Director of the Joint United Nations Programme on HIV/AIDS.
Thank you. Thank you. President of General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by saying thanks to the President of the General Assembly, the co-facilitators, the Secretary General, and the member states who are here today for helping us to draft one of the most important political declarations. I know it was not easy. I know it was complex, but this political declaration will certainly help us to close a door and open a new one for ending AIDS. I want just to start by saying here with you that the UN Charter begins with three powerful words: we the people. I stand before you today to say that we the peoples have broken the trajectory of HIV/AIDS epidemic. We together have been able to deliver on MDG 6. We have brought new infection, death rates significantly down. We have delivered on 2011 political declaration. I know it's not easy because I remember in the same rooms in 2001, someone took the floor and told us that we could not give a treatment to poor people, that they will not be able to follow protocol, that it will be too expensive to pay for them. Of course, treatment was $15,000 per person per year, but we have been able to prove them wrong. We managed to break the price. We reduced the price. Today we are talking about less than $100 per person per year. And we have been able to put people on treatment, like Secretary General said, 15 million people, like the political declaration was requesting us, but we achieved this goal 8 months before. We even exceed that goal. We managed to have 17 million people on treatment. That would have never been possible without your commitment, without your hard work. And I want to say again, on the name of those people who will never have chance to meet, thank you for your support. And I want to share with you a great news today. It is indeed the first time in history of HIV/AIDS that we can say that Africa has been able to reach the tipping point. It is the first time indeed that we have more people on treatment in Africa than are newly infected, which is just amazing. No one could have believed on that. we must also pay attention to West Africa and Central Africa. West Africa and Central Africa, unfortunately, is left behind. We need to make sure that the political leaders will mobilize energy in West Africa and Central Africa to triple the treatment initiation rate within 3 years. It is important that we don't have two-speed way approach in the continent. It is also my duty today to say thanks to you, because it's so beautiful that our once distant dream to end transmission from mother to child, to have AIDS-free generation, is becoming a reality. We have been hearing at the beginning of the year Cuba saying that they eliminate the transmission from mother to child. Yesterday, WHO certified Thailand, Belarus, and Armenia also as countries who have been eliminating transmission from mother to child. Who could have believed that we could have a free generation born from HIV? Today, it is a success story, because I can tell you many other countries will follow. South Africa used to have just 4 years back more than 58,000 babies born every year with HIV. Today, they have less than 6,000 babies born with HIV. I can tell you that more than 80 countries today have been able to demonstrate that they will soon achieve this goal, because they have less than 50 babies born every year with HIV. But more than all of that, few years back, we had less than 1% of the pregnant women living with HIV on ART. Today, with your collective effort, we have more than 73% of those mothers on treatment. I want just to say again, we the people made this commitment together, and we delivered this result together. It was not a few of us. It was not some of us. The United Nations must always represent all of us. This was not just this effort of giving certainly treatment to millions of people, was not just about giving pills. It was about restoring dignity of people. It was about fighting against social injustice. It was about making sure that equity will be every single places. One by one, we are breaking the bonds of stigma, discrimination, prejudice, and exclusion. We should work to ensure that no one, I said no one, is left behind because of who they are or who they love. This includes prisoners, migrant population, people with disabilities, men having sex with men, people who use drugs, sex workers, transgender. The doors of the UN should be open to all. We cannot afford we cannot afford to silence their voices as we come together to chart a course towards ending AIDS epidemic. Let us not forget, I repeat again, we are the peoples. The rights to health and dignity must be universal, as enshrined in the UN Charter. The AIDS response has always been about partnership, solidarity, innovation, and social transformation. AIDS has demonstrated the power of integration with TB, Hep C, with maternal health and child health, with sexual reproductive health, with cervical cancer and rights. And we have produced unprecedented results with the support of Global Fund, PEPFAR, and all of you. 8.8 million deaths have been averted. But those results and gains are fragile. Women are being raped, exploited, and infected at the same rates as 20 years ago. Adolescent girls especially remains shockingly vulnerable. Stigma and discrimination continues to push people to the shadows and prevents them from accessing life-saving services. We need a prevention revolution with the young people at the center. At the time when 62 people, I said 62 people, own as much as the poor half of the world's population, it is unacceptable that we will leave 20 million people dying because they will not have access to treatment. AIDS is not over, but it can be. The next 5 years will be critical. We have to get countries on the fast track. We have to achieve 90-90-90. We should normalize testing and reach every one of the 19 million people who don't know their status. We have to front-load our investment. If we do not act now to break the backbone of the epidemic once and for all, the world will never forgive us for the consequences of our complacency. We can do it, we must do it with the people. Thank you very much.
I thank the Executive Director of UNH for his statement. Pursuant to paragraph 2B of Resolution 70/228, I now give the floor to Mrs. Lois Maturo from Zimbabwe.
A very good morning to us all. Thank you, Mr. President of the General Assembly, for your kind invitation for me to speak here today. Mr. Secretary General of the UN and the Executive Director of UNAIDS, my brother, Ndaba, who's speaking here with me today, Excellencies, colleagues, friends. Let me just start by saying, standing here today, I am truly humbled to address in this important gathering on behalf of my peers. Let me start by sharing my brief background about my story growing up with HIV. In 2002, when I was 10 years old, I lost my mother and my younger brother in the same week due to HIV and tuberculosis. This was the most painful moment for me, as these were the people that were close to my heart. In 2004, when I was 12 years old, I got really sick and I stopped going to school for some months. One of my aunts that I was staying with went with me to the clinic, and I was informed that I have HIV and tuberculosis. Knowing it was the most depressing moment for me. I cried, and I thought I was going to die, but here I am today. I had a long journey. after losing my mother and my younger brother. In 2010, I faced a lot of emotional and verbal abuse from one of my family members, and I tried killing myself by taking all of the medication that I had because I could not contain the situation. I got admitted to the hospital, and when I was discharged, I got massive counseling from an organization called Africa Gendiri back in Zimbabwe. And I said to myself, if I am going to live in this world again, I want to share my story growing up with HIV, and I want to make sure that adolescents and young people gain their confidence, are able to take their HIV medication, and they're able to realize their dreams and hopes for the future. Now, every day that I live, I am thankful that I am one of the 17 million people that marks the success of HIV treatment over the past years. And it shows that together we have the greatest strength of saving more lives, like how my life was saved. And it shows that we are able to evade AIDS-related deaths, because now I am tired of seeing adolescents dying because they are not able to take or to adhere to their HIV treatment. Seeing adolescents fail second-line treatment, fail third-line treatment, because there are no peer-led interventions to motivate them to take their HIV treatment daily. And this makes me ask, where is our investment going towards as countries? Who is our priority if we are not going to leave anyone behind? Sharing my story, I hope it reflected that adolescent girls and young women, we are vulnerable, at risk, the most affected population among any other age groups. And there is need for us to prioritize key populations, men who have sex with men, sex workers, people who inject drugs, prisoners, and migrants. And today, I call upon governments not to exclude them. Let me start by sharing some of the challenges that we face as adolescents and young people. Access and availability of treatment care and support services are not always available when we need them. And most of us are not financially stable to pay for the services. Yes, HIV treatment is for free, but in most clinics, administrative fees have to be paid, but we cannot afford them. Ministers of health, what does this speak to us in our HIV and AIDS progress at country level? Stigma is one of the biggest barriers, as it affects us mentally and hinder our progress as adolescents and young people. Let me just say, in the past 2 weeks, I was talking to one of my peers who is an adolescent, and she was crying and very depressed because she was denied certification of what she was doing because of her HIV status. And we are here today talking about empowering adolescent girls and young women, ending AIDS, sharing this scenario of my friend. What does it mean, again, to us in our HIV and AIDS progress? We believe that for us to accelerate ending AIDS among adolescents and young people, there is need to invest in evidence-based adherence support interventions so that adolescents and young people are supported to adhere, even when we talk about PrEP. there is need of having clear investment strategy to support advocacy for and by adolescents and young people. More resource mobilization needs to be done for scaling up friendly facilities by training healthcare workers on how to provide friendly treatment care services for adolescents and young people, for us to be able to say we will be able to end AIDS by 2030. But if this is not addressed in my generation, we will continue to say the same problem even for the next generation. Ending it for good, it's not just about signing the HLM political declaration, but it requires teamwork, together united for one agenda. And let me say that the political declaration would not be a standalone approach for us to end AIDS by 2030. And we need to take advantage of the upcoming AIDS conference to start drawing upon the roadmap to ending AIDS. And we know that Global Fund is already mobilizing financial resources for AIDS, TB, and malaria for the most burdened countries like where I come from in Zimbabwe. And this is the time to make sure we have a fully funded Global Fund to end it for good. My last words are, please trust and believe in adolescents and young people in your countries to help shape the way society thinks and programs HIV and AIDS. The journey towards ending AIDS, we already began it. And now is the time to accelerate our efforts. And with these words, I thank you.
Thank you so much to Mrs. Maturo for her statement. Pursuant to paragraph 2B of Resolution 70/228, I now give the floor to Mr. Ndaba Mandela, Chairman and co-founder of Africa Rising Foundation.
Honorable Mr. President, Your Excellency, Mr. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, when I was 19, my mother died of HIV/AIDS. When I was 21, my father died of HIV/AIDS. I will never forget the day our family gathered before the press conference to tell the world why my father had died. As we gathered, a family member suggested that we say it's TB or pneumonia. And my grandfather said, no, we shall not do that. We shall tell the world my son died of HIV/AIDS. My grandfather was not afraid of the truth. Nelson Mandela instead spoke out loudly and with dignity. His only surviving son, Makgatho Lewanika Mandela, had died of AIDS. Madiba was determined that his only son would not die in silence and in vain. This was the beginning of a national dialogue on AIDS in South Africa and a global action around the world. I am here today to ask you to continue the legacy of Nelson Mandela, a legacy of unity and a legacy of leadership. I am here to ask you to ensure that all 37 million people living with HIV today can access immediate antiretroviral treatment and live full, healthy lives while they wait for a cure. 1990 by 2020 should be the milestone for every country as the world moves to end AIDS once and for all. But we'll never end this epidemic by treatment alone. Today, we have the tools to stop every new HIV infection, and it is a crime that they're not being used fully and immediately. I am here to ask you to ensure that the hundreds of millions of people at daily risk, LGBTI people, people who use drugs, sex workers, migrants, serodiscordant couples, and people living with HIV who live in silence and fear can wake up every day to good health, well-being, and dignity. They can go to work, school, or their local clinic unafraid of arrest, physical danger, or discrimination simply because of who they are or who they love. I'm here to ask leaders of the 35 countries that still don't allow foreigners living with HIV to enter or reside within their countries to end travel restrictions now. Because the truth is that building walls or denying visas is not how we protect ourselves from HIV. Or end a global epidemic. Bigotry and fear do nothing but spread the virus. I'm here to echo the bold call of my mentor, Michel Sidibe, to make Fast Track the only track for ending AIDS in all cities, fragile communities and countries, and to make the end of AIDS the first SDG target that our generation achieves. I am also here to ask each of us to take a three-pronged personal pledge to end AIDS. First, get tested for HIV and know your status. Second, always carry 2 condoms, at least 2. One for you to use without fail, and another to give to someone who isn't carrying one. It could save your life and it could save theirs. Finally, when you learn that a friend, relative, co-worker, or neighbor is living with HIV, give them a hand up and not a cold shoulder. None of these actions cost much, but if we all do them, the impact will be priceless. And that will be the best down payment on the end of AIDS. It has been 11 years since my father passed away. And although I am older now, I still want him to be proud. I would have loved to see the look on his eyes today as I address the opening of this historical meeting in this historical place. Today, the eyes of millions living with HIV are on us. They are counting on us today as we launch this high-level meeting. They are counting on us to make an unprecedented commitment to the end of AIDS. And they are counting on us to keep our promise. Let us make history. Let us make them proud. As the great Nelson Mandela said, it is in our hands. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Ndaba Mandela for his statement. We have now heard the last speaker for the opening segment of the high-level meeting.